Alright, what is up, YouTube family? It's KRod7435. I'm back with another good video for today. Live stream videos, you already know how it is. I find these like a lot better to get done. So yeah, let's get right to it, man. I wanted to address, I guess, the situation with Jake Paul's recent comments on what he was talking about in regards to I guess fighter pay and having a union in boxing. Knowing that he will be fighting Tyron Woodley tonight, for those of you that are watching the fight, I'm probably not even gonna cover that fight, honestly, because it's really not much to really talk about. I'll come out with like my post-fight, prediction, or my post-fight reactions of those fights. But either way, I'm looking forward to seeing Amanda the Real Deal Holyfield Serrano give Yamilev Mercado a boxing lesson. That's going to be a really fun fight. I think Yamilev, she's going to come with everything that she has in her skill set, but I think Amanda Serrano is going to destroy her just because that she's just at a high veteran level. And 9 times out of 10, if a good veteran gives a young fighter a good fight, that young fighter will eventually rise up from a loss. Or even if she or he wins, it still defies greatness in both fighters, because as styles do make fights, anything could happen in boxing. So never disregard that. But as far as Amanda Serrano goes, I don't ever see her really losing to a girl like her, because her deficiencies compared to Yamilev's deficiencies tend to have more tools into the tool bag. So yeah, let's talk about Jake Paul for a minute, because he said something really interesting about fighters' pay compared to boxing and MMA. And he, I believe he said he wanted to create some form of like a union in boxing, which I disagreed with that part, but I'm gonna go into that later in this video. But let's talk about the fighters' pay. He said something really interesting about fighters' pay. He compared to like all the fighter pay deficiencies that you get in MMA compared to boxing, where in the UFC fighters don't really have a say. They're pretty much like controlled by the one guy that controls the organization, that being Dana White. And I guess with Dana White, he only gives pay, or good decent pay, which isn't even that much money, because we have seen big names in the UFC just leave because it's like, the pay that they were supposed to get didn't come to their pockets right away, and then they get cut off in money that they should have been guaranteed. And then on top of that, fighters don't get sponsorships in the UFC. It's only UFC approved sponsorships that don't even cut out like basically the amount of money that a UFC fighter should be making is not the money that you would expect a fighter to get, because they're probably getting like less than 10% of that money. So the money itself doesn't really make any sense as far as like what a fighter should get theoretically in combat sports, because one, you're putting your life on the line, and two, you should be getting more exposure as a fighter, because everybody wants to see you get knockouts or at least put on a good dominating performance. So that's what anybody would think coming into a MMA match. But what Jake said that was really interesting was that the UFC fighters, they don't get paid enough to the standard where at certain points of their careers, they usually get cut off because the money that they get didn't really meet, the ends to justify their means. Where, yeah, they do get their health insurance, they do get some form of like a fighter's benefit package, but it's not even helping them out financially, because most of what the money that they receive is probably going towards all the deductions that they have to pay off, as far as like paying out their team, paying out their medical bills, which I think the medical coverage is covered by the UFC, but they still have to go out to the doctor every now and then just to pay out their own insurance for out-of-pocket expenses if they're going through like major injuries or major fights that really messed them up big time. So obviously there's more taxing financial deficiencies that fighters have to go through, where they're having to spend a lot of money on their health and there's not a lot of money coming into them in the first place. So it's really terrible for that type of situation itself. And Jake made a good point about that. And when he compared that to boxing is the same way. But the problem in boxing is that boxing's just a contract where you just agree to whatever stipulations that both parties can say yes to, and then you just get your money and go. Boxing doesn't really have like a fight league per se that would be better on the scale of the UFC, which if you compare boxing to the NBA, in basketball, the NBA does things way better than for what boxing should be doing. Because at one point, for those of you that don't know, boxing did have a nationalized organization similar to the NBA. They did have a league type structure where fighters did come together, and that was called the NBA itself, but it was called the National Boxing Association. And what happened was that I believe that got outlawed by the state, and then it was later replaced by sanctioning bodies to monopolize and structure these title organizations to have their own way to commission and sanction fights in whatever way that they want to. And that's where you have all this corruption and sanctioning fees, not having enough money paid out to a fighter, especially when they're having to make weight, and then they have to go through all these clauses that every title sanction committee tells them what they can or cannot do. And then the money itself doesn't really help them, especially if they're going to make a title defense, or even if they're going to unify, because if they unify, the sanction fees are going to be triple or double the amount of what they have to go through. And then on top of that, they're not getting any benefit for holding a belt. You're just using it for show, and then by the time when it's ready for you to fight for a title or to defend your title, it's like, why aren't you getting more money? You know what I'm saying? Like, you should be getting like mega millions for having a world title. Like, if you win a title in the NBA pays you like, I think like 25 to 35% more for what you made out of your whole entire year of that contract. And then on top of that, you get more money by the team that you play with. That's actually really good, if you ask me, because the NBA, they take care of you. They have all this money coming in because everybody sees, the best teams face each other every single day, because the best fight the best all the time. So if you have that in boxing, which, this is where I disagreed with Jake on the scale of having a fighters union, because that's really not necessary to have, because unions are naturally anti-free market. But the problem with what having a union is that you're going to have another organization control other people's money, and then there's going to be some loopholes within those unions itself that's going to screw fighters a certain way, and then fighters themselves can't be represented properly by the union, and then people are just going to get pissed off, and then they're going to end up leaving. Because they're going to be like, okay, well, fuck it. I'm not going to fight for, I'm not going to fight under this union, and then this union's not going to represent me however I want to. So it doesn't make any sense for what people could ask for coming out of a union, because the union itself is going to be politicized by whatever sanctioning body that probably wants to be in cahoots with them. And that, that happens, all the time. In the sport of boxing now, you have all these judges, going to dinner with all these like commission sanctioning body presidents or associates that work for the WBA or the WBC, the WBO, and the IBF. You don't think that there's corruption behind closed doors between, all the big dogs that are, in cahoots with promoters and all these just dirty ass people. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's not like the NBA, where in the NBA you have people that actually represent each other and they don't need to be unionized for it. There's a market competition that actually makes sure that the NBA protects itself within the organization alone. So like, if I work in IT and I'm getting paid big money by the NBA, let's just say that they're paying me like $2 to $3 million a year, I'm having to represent myself for the NBA to make sure that the NBA's IT, IT infrastructure is well protected, because they're like, there's going to be people in there that are probably going to be corrupt and sick in the head to try to steal private information, or secure network data. And that's a really big risk that nobody in the NBA wants. So they're going to pay big money to all those top level IT ethical hackers of some sort or whatever, to make sure that the NBA is protected, because the NBA wants to have a good fan base for for a major long run, and the NBA does a good job making sure that players are well dedicated to their team. And if they're not going to fulfill those those needs that are expected out of those teams itself, then they cut those players, and then those players either go to the NBA D League, or they can go to other teams elsewhere, to other parts of the world, to compete for, a spot over there before they could maybe try to revisit another opportunity in the NBA. See, now what Jake Paul wants, he wants to have more pay increase for the fighters, which I'm all for that. At the end of the day, the sport of boxing needs to be, it needs to be marketized more. It needs to be marketized at a more higher level competition, where you have to face your best competition, but you should get paid a crap load of money for it. Boxing should be better than the NBA. Boxing should be the number 1 sport in the world. I think a lot of people can agree with me, if you're going to come here and watch, this video later on, and later on in the future. But the problem is that fighters, they don't want to come together, and the problem is that when fighters do try to come together, it's usually going to end up in some form of a dispute between teams trying to say, oh, well, I want more money for this fighter. But guess what? If the team themselves want to cherry pick and give this fighter all these easy fights, like Canelo Alvarez getting his way with, the WBC to do all this evil shit, and let's just say there's like a union protecting the WBC with whatever the hell that they want to do. That's not going to be good, because you're going to give what the state legalized immunity power to these sanctioning bodies that are going to do way worse than for what they do now. And then there's not going to be any protection of the fighters, other than the sanctioning bodies protecting promoters, protecting whoever is in the pockets of their union per se. So that's something that I disagree with Jake Paul, because he does have a good mindset. I think he's right about fighters' pay, but I think it just needs to be marketized more, similar to the NBA's business model. I think that would be a good start, where you do have representatives in the NBA that are organized in a sanctioned committee, where the market itself is determined by the consumers that want to vote with their money, with who is eligible to work for the associations itself. Honestly, I would say my idea that would that would override unions in any sport would have to be organized sports leagues. Have something like the NBA, where boxing can have a associated nationalized league, where it is a nationalized organization of marketized individuals that come in to give the sport for what people pay for. You come to the sport of boxing to be the best. You should be coming to boxing fights to see the best. But you cannot have that when a promoter is the one calling the shots, and then the sanction bodies are in the pockets of promoters, giving politicized immunity to fighters that don't want to fight the best. And therefore you see all these all these mismatch made fights, where you have this one fighter that's heavily favorited, blah blah blah, and then the other fighters are not that heavily favorited, but nobody doesn't know this fighter. It's a 60-40 matchup or a 80-20 matchup, because nobody doesn't see the best fight the best all the time in boxing. But in the NBA or the NFL or the MLB or the NHL, all these marketized leagues that are obviously they're obviously driven by the consumer to give us what we want as fans of those sports. Everybody knows that the best let the best teams face each other all the time. But in boxing, you don't see that. Boxing is complete opposite. anybody could just do, like whatever the hell they want, because there's no actual marketized organization in the sport, and then there's so much corruption that allows people to get away with dirty crap in the sport. That's what creates so much, disadvantages in fights, because nobody can ever tell if that was a fair fight or not. We see it all the time with Michael Fox and Gabriel Maestre. We saw it with O'Shaquie Foster and his team catching tampered gloves by Miguel Roman's team, where Miguel Roman, he obviously knew he can't fucking beat O'Shaquie Foster fair and square. So what? He has to come out of his way, get exposed for cheating with his gloves tampered? No, you don't see this out of the NBA. You don't see the Los Angeles Lakers come out of their way wanting to tamper, the Miami Heat's water or some shit to try to get them killed or get them sick in the NBA Finals. No, because the NBA makes sure that they check those players before they go out on the court. You don't see people coming out of their way being dirty on the court. There were a couple times where referees were being paid off to do some evil shit, in a basketball game. Like the one referee in the NBA Finals, I think it was in the 2011 or 2012 NBA Finals, he got paid off of some shit for giving more calls to the Miami Heat rather than the Dallas Mavericks, and I think he got locked up for that shit. But that's where accountability comes into place, because there's more accountability being held in nationalized, marketized leagues versus in sports that don't have any marketized organization, like boxing. That's what makes that's what makes up the sport extremely unpopular, because nobody doesn't want to come to a sport where there's no fairness in it, and therefore the fans themselves are going to be, egotistical maniacs to try to protect their fighter and say, oh, well, Canelo, he didn't cheat against Billy Ho Saunders. Just understand us as, Canelo fans, to say that he wasn't cheating in any of his other previous fights. So therefore, Billy Joe Saunders was a fair, easy victory for Canelo, and Canelo has never cheated ever since he got caught with clenbuterol levels since the Triple G fights, right? But it's like, when you see cheating out of the NBA, everyone catches that shit. Everyone sees what happens out of those leagues itself. And I'm not to even say that cheating can ever go away. There's always going to be cheating in any sport, but I'm saying you can reduce cheating to such a tiny level of cheating left, where the sport itself is still good for you to come back and see, because everyone's competing at a high, fair level. And that's what I'm saying that Jake Paul should have probably said. Everyone should be competing at a high level, and there needs to be more marketized organization in the sport itself, for boxing in particular. And I think that's a really good idea that Jake is, he's standing up for fighters to get paid more, because take a look at what's happening now. You got fighters like fucking I'll just go with Curtis Harper. That's a good example. When Curtis Harper, when he fought F.A. Ajagba, everybody wanted to say, oh, he ducked F.A. in that fight, once he got inside the ring and then he left out. But little do people know, Curtis Harper came out days later saying that he didn't get paid for his fight alone, because what happened was that he got paid for the fight, but after all the deductions that he had to pay out for his team, and then I guess at the taxes or whatever bullshit that that came in later, it wasn't worth fighting FA, because he didn't get any money coming to him. So he basically had to fight for free to fight FA Ajagba, but his team got paid, but he didn't get paid at all, because everything got deducted out of his whole entire pay, that it was basically worthless fighting FA. So he basically left, the fight for that reason, for him not getting paid. And I think that makes perfect sense for Jake Paul to talk about that, because if more fighters like Curtis came out to say that, that actually would expose the pure corruption in boxing, where we need to have bigger paychecks for the fighters, because the fighters themselves put their lives on the line. But I'm not to say that some Joe Schmo should get paid like $100,000 to $200,000 worth of fight. No, if they're gonna get up to that level, they should at least get paid at least $50,000 to at least, to the lowest, I'd say 40, yeah, I would say 20 to 40K a fight, because at least that way you give a fighter some bread to give them the incentive to come back and fight, because at least that way they're not going to complain about pay, because if they want to get paid more, and let's just say they're fighting the best competition, you're gonna get paid more, because everybody knows who you are. Look at Sean Porter. He should be a multi-billionaire. I'm just putting that out there. In theoretical terms, a Sean Porter type of fighter should be getting paid a lot of money. He should have gotten pay-per-view a long time ago. Him and Kell Brook would have been worth a pay-per-view, right? Because one, Sean Porter is, he was, the IBF world champion, and when Kell Brook took that away from him, it should have been pay-per-view between Kell Brook and Errol Spence. But why don't we see these pay-per-view fights more in boxing? Because when you compare it to the NBA, everybody knows that the Los Angeles Lakers was a good team at one point. Everyone goes to a Los Angeles Lakers game to go see them beat up all the other teams, because they know that they're such a powerhouse team that no matter what happens in their games, there's no need to pay out for a pay-per-view for them, because the Los Angeles Lakers generates enough revenue for the fans to come out. But for the sport of boxing, you're meaning to tell me that a pay-per-view is not worth watching a fight when a champion comes out of his way, beats all of his or her best competition, and yet when it's time for them to step up more competition to either unify or defend their belts or belt against a high level ranking opponent themselves, that's not worth a pay-per-view? Because that's really why boxing sucks, because the best are not fighting the best. See, now if the best fight each other all the time, similar to what the UFC or the or whatever major sport does, boxing would be number one in the world for pay-per-views. I'm just putting that out there, because when you kind of think about it, when Muhammad Ali, when he was one of the greatest heavyweights coming up out of all time, Muhammad Ali was making billions upon billions of views. Because why? It was what he did outside of the sport to make himself a big name. I'm not saying fighters have to be like a Muhammad Ali, but when you are urging to fight the best in boxing, and when you are defeating your best competition, or you're going up against them where you might win or lose, you're going to be remembered for that. So I think that if boxing was strictly set up like a league, like the NBA, where you had the best fight the best every single day, then guys like Jake Paul would not exist, where more fighters would exist to be big household names. Like, think about it. If you had Gervonta Tank Davis and Devin Haney fight each other early in their careers, and then let's just say Devin Haney, he wins at the first time, and then Tank goes on to become a 3-division world champion, and Tank is a world champion at 140, and Devin's a world champion at 135, and let's just say Devin and Tank, they want to run it back. Devin can go up to 140, say, hey Tank, I want that smoke with you, and then Tank is like, okay, you want that you want that smoke again. Devin and Tank can fight for pay-per-view for that next fight. Because why? Because there's a build-up for the fight. Devin won the first time, and then Gervonta, he's a world champion. That's going to make a big-ass fight. And also on top of that, if you get rid of all these sanctioning bodies, all these cuts that fighters have to go through where they have to pay out their team, the team themselves should get paid out by the people, by the networks and by the league itself. If there was a league itself that garnered all the money that's being generated in boxing fights, which it's mainly networks that do give out the majority of money to fighters, because when you kind of think about it, Top Rank, DAZN, Matchroom, all these type of boxing boxing agency networks that can come out and co-sponsor these fights. Also, on top of that, sponsorships. That's another big issue too. Boxers should be getting more sponsorships because, as far as we know, boxers are not really exposed enough to the media to get enough sponsorships. So if you put those fighters out on a ESPN or UFC Fight Pass, which that is a good idea and I like it. Yeah, I like it. You put them out more on Showtime. You put them out more on PBC. You put them out more on, let's just say, I don't know, I'm just making stuff up. If you had like a Nickelodeon Sports Fight Network, or if you had a, I don't know, Nike Sports Fight Network, all these networks, if they were to be on the come up, and there, there's like a plethora of networks that you could fight on, just to have your name out there consistently, that will definitely help out fighters that are co-sponsored with multiple sponsorships, fighters that are given big ass deals. Like, let's just say they get like don't you know how in the NBA, those players get shoe deals, they get clothing line deals, all those good deals given to all those athletes. They're set for life, man. Boxing doesn't get any of that. If boxing had that, oh my god, you'd be seeing the brandings for every single fighter, because if it was marketized like the NBA in that sense, you would never have to think about a Wilfredo Benitez being broke after the sport. Which, I mean, yeah, there probably will still be people like that not knowing how to spend their money properly. And yet, if they're struggling, then that's up to them if they want to get a financial advisor to handle their money. But I'm saying, in theoretical terms, a fighter should have more economic freedom to do more business with businesses that are willing to do business with them based on their performance. Because if you kind of think about it, it makes all the sense in the world to have that, because the fighters themselves are putting more exposure out to the branding public of what consumers that look at fighters that are doing good versus fighters that are doing bad, and then they'll determine if those fighters are worth putting their money into. And that actually makes a lot of sense, because if you think about it, let's just say Pizza Hut, Domino's, Red Robin, all these chain organizations, all these businesses that you could think of that want to sponsor fighters like Deontay Wilder, Anthony Joshua, Gervonta Tank Davis, Errol Spence, Terrence Crawford. These guys would be making a crap load of money. See, now when we head over to the women's side of boxing, that's a different thing too, because women, where we see them now, they're not doing good because not a lot of ladies be talking up, or not a lot of females be speaking up about the issue in boxing. But let's just say, theoretically, if boxing was popular for both genders, you would already see more women like Clarissa Shields, Amanda Serrano, women like Ann Wolfe, Chrissy Martin, Lucia Riker. All the household names would be generating a lot more female athletic talent, and that would definitely uplift women a lot better, and more fighters would just get hella exposure, and there would be nothing to complain about, because all the economic deficiencies would be gone, because fighters now have a voice to say what they want to say. And that's another problem too in boxing. There's not enough exposure for the fighters to say what they want to say, where they have to say their piece to get people to make them watch them. Where you see a fighter like Clarissa Shields talking her smack to the media, and it's good because that's what creates build-up in boxing. That's what makes fighters be like, oh, wait a minute, this girl, she's saying that she's like the best in the world, blah blah blah. No, she's not. She should say good things about the sport. She should be humble, blah blah blah, because knowing that she's a world champion, she should be mature and respectful, so that way her fans can come back and watch her. No, she doesn't. At least with Clarissa Shields, she's saying what she says because that's what she wants you to think about her. She wants you to know that she can say all the crap that she wants, but everybody's now coming to see her lose because they want to see how good she is being tested at the highest level. And see, now, if women's boxing had the amount of talent as men did now, because boxing is a male-dominated sport, but let's just say females, were just as dominant as men, you'd be seeing so many women call out Clarissa. And if it was like, like a NBA structure style ranking system where you had power rankings for every female that fought in a particular league, then all the ladies would fight each other for one face, one name for that particular league division. Because all the weight classes would definitely be structured for what weight classes sell out more, and more people would, vote with their money, or, determine with their value of money of what weight classes are the weight classes to see. Also, that's another problem in boxing too, especially with fighters' pay, because everybody, that complains about not getting paid enough in a particular division, there's too many divisions in boxing. That's a fact. I don't I'm not going to try to be disrespectful here, but one of one of Puerto Rico's champions, Wilfredo Benbito Mendez, he's a 105-pound champion for the WBO, but nobody doesn't care about him because Wilfredo Benbito Mendez, he's a small guy. He's not going to be interesting enough to hear about because nobody doesn't know who the hell he is. And I'm not trying to be disrespectful. I'm trying to be as respectful as possible, but if I'm a casual and I hear that name, I'm going to be like, who the hell is that guy? I don't know who that guy is. But at least I know who Gary Russell is, because Gary Russell, he was on the PBC, and then I saw him fight on one night when I was at the bar, and then boom, I saw Gary Russell knock out, this type of fighter that I didn't know. But guess what? His name was there because I knew who Gary Russell was. So that's really the problem. I think weight classes need to be minimized more, where if you started from like 126 to like 135. Yeah, I would say 126 to 135, and then you started, like for example, like my particular weight classes that I would have would be 126, 135, 147, and 160. Yeah, like 168, because I don't want to have all these like junior divisions. I like to have like a set division. So 168, and then I would have 180, or I would have, I don't know. I would like to have like the light heavyweight division, but I kind of feel like no one doesn't care about that. So I like to set it at 180. That would be like a better division. But yeah, let's just go with 175. That'll be our 5th division. And then we have the heavyweight division from 215 pounds and up. And the 7th division will be the cruiserweight division, but honestly, no, I would get rid of the cruiserweight division. I would just have the heavyweight division at 200 pounds or higher, because once you hit, above 200 pounds, you're already like a heavyweight once you hit like 10 pounds at like 210 or 215. So, the heavyweight division really starts at like 200 plus pounds. But anything under 200 would be, let's just say, I would actually say for the light heavyweight division should start from 175 to at least 195, because when I used to wrestle in high school, there was a 195-pound division, and that was technically the cruiserweight division. But if you fought at like 175, you're basically put at the 182-pound division, and 175 was basically like meaningless, because it's like you were basically fighting, or you were basically gonna wrestle at the light heavyweight or junior cruiserweight division. So that's basically like what those divisions were for wrestling, because wrestling was like pretty weird with like weight classes. It was just as similar to boxing, but you had like atom weight, you had like 96-pound guys going at it, and then then it moved up to like minimum weight flyweights. You had your bantam weights, super flyweight. Like you had too many divisions in wrestling, but for me in particular, those are my customized weight divisions that I would have for boxing if it was set up like a league per se. And I think that's what boxing boxing weight divisions should be. They should be minimized more, so that way, if you want to come in at, like, let's just say 105 pounds, and you know that you're going to face a guy that's like 126, then you best believe that you better you better like rehydrate to like 120 or at least 115, so that way you could have some meat in your bones to handle a guy that's 126. Because at least that way, it kind of gives people like a better view to look at guys a lot more different. Because like we all know, especially for women's boxing, that's really like the biggest issue, because a lot of females, a lot of girls are small. A lot of women don't really have a lot of physique in them. So, I would probably even say for the female division, it would kind of just be like the same thing. It would just be 126, 135, 147, and 168. I would not even have like the super welterweight and middleweight division. Like that's pretty meaningless to have that, because those girls can easily just fight each other in the 168 pound limit, and then you would bump it up to, I would say, like 195. Yeah, I would say 195, because like we don't see no women being bigger than 200 pounds. But after that, I would say, like, once it goes up to the heavyweight division for females, it would just be I don't know, I would probably keep it to like 250. Like I don't ever see, like obviously, like, we're not going to see no female versions of Deontay Wilder walking around at like 6'1", 230 pounds. Like, no, obviously, like, we're not going to see women like that. But for all the smaller version type of ladies, like the Amanda Serranos of the world, or the Katie Taylor fighters, obviously those women can fight it out, and there will definitely be more exciting fights. And then on top of that, I guess like a good thing that Jake Paul did say is that there should be more 3-minute round fights for women's boxing. So I definitely give Jake Paul his props for saying that, because obviously with what the fighters pay, being so low, especially for women, there are cases where women had to give up rounds for free, or to fight for free, just to pay out their opponents properly for a fight to basically be fair, per se, financially. So that's a big problem that we obviously see for the sport of women's boxing compared to men's boxing. Those guys are actually paid a little bit more decent, but like I said, there needs to be more marketized innovation for the sport of boxing. There needs to be a fight league. There needs to be like a nationalized, marketized league, similar to the NBA in a way, where you have fighter sponsorships, giving exposure to fighters. Obviously there needs to be more networks supporting fighters. I would like to see multiple networks co-sponsor a lot of fighters to fight on globalized networks like Nike, like Foot Locker, like ESPN, like, I don't know, like anything that you could think of that could make somebody be like, wow, that's Clarissa Shields. She's like dominating all these people, but she's fighting the best competition in this particular league itself. And actually, come to think about it, it wouldn't even just be one fight league. There could be multiple of them. Like, don't you guys like remember when Chuck Norris had his WCL league? Why can't that come back? I would pay money to see those girls fight each other on WCL. Shit, why doesn't like the UFC have their own boxing league? That would be dope too. Like, you'd be seeing all the names going there: Deontay Wilder, Anthony Joshua. I would never put Tyson Fury in there, but guess what? If we want to have like a Tyson Fury in there, fine. He ain't gonna cheat, but guess what? If you had like a Tyson Fury pull up to those type of leagues itself, that would be fun to see him in there. It would be good to see Clarissa Shields in there. It would be good to see any UFC fighter getting into boxing to fight on a boxing stable. That would be good too. So I think either way, there's so many good ideas that a lot of people can, I guess brainstorm about, and I definitely like to see where things can go. So hopefully, we can see everything come into place in the future. And I would like to see those ideas come to fruition. And, huge credits to Jake Paul trying to stand up for boxers, because it's good that he has a good mindset of coming into the sport. Only thing I really disagreed with him would just be the fighters union. I don't think that should ever be a thing, because that's just going to open more doors for corruption. And I think what you see now out of unions that are corrupting other industries, that's not to be, how should I say, that's not to be a thing to start up in a sport like boxing, because we obviously don't see this out of the NBA. There's no union out of the NBA. There's no need for one. But guess what? The NBA players, they get paid damn good money. So what's up the point of trying to unionize and try to control other people's money? It's almost like a government in a way that would just use your money for things that you never asked for. But then again, why would you even want it in the first place? So that's pretty much what I have to say. I had a good 40 minutes explaining my piece, but I'm going to come out with more videos. There's more video topics that I have in mind. So yeah, I'll see you guys later. I hope you guys enjoyed this video live stream. Thank you guys for watching. This is Kieran Rodriguez. I'm signing out. Thank you. Bye.